Imagine flying through the freezing darkness of the Eastern Front, in a plane made of wood and canvas, with no parachute, no radar, no armor, and no guns. Imagine drifting silently over enemy camps, cutting your engine so you become nothing more than a shadow in the night, and then releasing your bombs before the Germans even realize what's happening. This wasn't a movie, this was real. And the world came to know these young women as the Night Witches, the Soviet Union's all-female bombing regiment whose courage struck fear deep into Nazi lines. Before we dive into their unbelievable story, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps this channel bring more powerful and lesser-known stories from history to life. When the German invasion of the Soviet Union began in 1941, the situation was desperate. The Red Army was struggling, cities were falling, and casualties were rising every day. But in the middle of this chaos, a Soviet hero named Marina Raskova, often called the Soviet Amelia Earhart, pushed for something no military had ever done before. She convinced Stalin to allow an all-female combat aviation unit, not for support roles, not for training, for actual combat. And so in 1942, 3 all-female air regiments were formed. The most famous of them all was the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. These women ranged from teenagers to university students. Many had never fired a weapon, flown at night, or seen the front lines. But they volunteered because their country was on the brink of collapse, and they refused to stand by and watch it fall. The planes made of wood and canvas. Now you might imagine fighter jets or heavy bombers, but what they got was the opposite. The Night Witches flew Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes, training aircraft that looked more like crop dusters. They were built of plywood and canvas, open cockpit, freezing cold, and slower than a modern car. German pilots joked that shooting one down was like shooting down a barn. But these little wooden planes had a hidden advantage. They were almost invisible on radar, and when the pilots cut their engines, they glided silently across the night sky. The only sound the Germans heard was a faint whooshing, like a broomstick sweeping overhead. Terrified soldiers began whispering that these women flew like witches in the night. The name stuck. They became Die Nachthexen, the Night Witches. First combat missions. The missions were brutal. The Night Witches flew in total darkness with no instruments, no radios, no navigation devices. If they got lost, they stayed lost. They flew low to the ground, making them easy targets. They wore men's uniforms, often oversized, because the military didn't issue female ones. And they had to stuff the boots with newspaper to keep them from falling off. Most nights, each pilot flew 10 to 15 missions, returning to base only long enough to grab more bombs before going back out again. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the Night Witches, hit the like button and drop a comment telling me which WW2 story I should cover next. It helps more people discover these incredible women, their tactics and bravery. The Night Witches used tactics that were both bold and terrifying. They often flew in groups of 3. The first 2 planes would dive toward German positions, drawing heavy gunfire. While the enemy focused on them, the 3rd plane slipped in silently, engine off, and dropped its bombs with deadly accuracy. Then they'd switch roles and do it again. One of the most remarkable facts about them? They flew without parachutes because the planes were too small and too heavy once loaded with bombs. Many said, if our plane is hit, a parachute won't save us anyway. Their bravery was legendary. 2 of the most famous members were Nadezhda Popova and Yevdokia Bershanskaya. Popova once flew 18 missions in a single night. Her plane returned riddled with bullets, struts shattered, fabric torn, instruments destroyed. But she survived and went right back into the air the next night. The Germans' fear and frustration. The Night Witches frustrated the German army so much that they began spreading rumors. They believed the women used special injections for night vision. They claimed the Soviets trained them from childhood to be advanced pilots. They insisted the Night Witches weren't human. None of it was true. These were just ordinary young women doing something extraordinary. Germany even offered Iron Crosses to any pilot who could shoot one down. But the Po-2 was so slow and nimble that many fast German fighters struggled to hit them. The Night Witches turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. By the end of the war, the Night Witches had flown over 30,000 missions and dropped more than 23,000 tons of bombs. They were so effective that 23 of them were awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union, the country's highest military honor. But despite their achievements, they were not celebrated the way male pilots were. They never received proper uniforms. They never flew state-of-the-art aircraft. And when the war ended, their regiment was disbanded and nearly forgotten. Yet today, their legacy continues to inspire people around the world, not just for their skill, not just for their bravery, but because they shattered expectations of what women could do in wartime. They were fearless, they were relentless, they were the night witches. If this story inspired you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. Let me know in the comments if you want more stories about forgotten heroes, untold WW2 missions, or extraordinary people who changed the course of history.